The election of 2016 was unlike any presidential race the world has ever seen or known. Never before was there such theatrics involved in policy. Never before was there so many shocks, so many surprises, so many dumbfounding moments. Never before was there a candidate like Donald J. Trump. Like him or not, Trump changed all the rules. Whether that's for the better or for the worst remains to be seen. Strap in for a wild ride as we examine Trump and his first term as President of the United States of America. The presidency of Donald Trump began at noon EST on January 20th, 2017, when he was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States of America, taking over the reins from Barack Obama. A Republican, Trump was a businessman and reality television personality from New York City at the time of his 2016 presidential election victory over Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. On November 9, 2016, Republicans Donald Trump of New York and Governor Mike Pence of Indiana won the 2016 election, defeating Democrats former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton of New York and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Trump won 304 electoral votes compared to Clinton's 227, though Clinton won a plurality of the popular vote, receiving nearly 2.9 million more votes than Trump. As a result of gaining the majority of the electoral votes, Trump became the fifth person to win the presidency while losing the popular vote. In the concurrent congressional elections, Republicans maintained majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The win was not without controversy. American intelligence agencies concluded that the electoral process was targeted by a Russian interference campaign. Intelligence sources have stated with high confidence that the Russian government attempted to intervene in the 2016 presidential election to favor the election of Trump, and that members of Trump's campaign were in contact with Russian government officials both before and after the presidential election. On May 9, 2017, Trump fired FBI Director James Comey, stating that he had accepted the recommendations of the Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to dismiss Comey. Sessions' recommendation was based on Rosenstein's, while Rosenstein wrote that Comey should be dismissed for his handling of the conclusion of the FBI investigation into the Hillary Clinton email controversy. On May 10th, Trump met Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Based on the White House notes of the meeting, Trump told the Russians, "I just fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nutjob. I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off." On May 11th, Trump said in a video interview, "Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey. In fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story." On May 18th, Rosenstein told members of the U.S. Senate that he recommended Comey's dismissal while knowing Trump had already decided to fire Comey. On May 31st, Trump wrote on Twitter, "I never fired James Comey because of Russia." The controversy continues until this very day. In the aftermath of Comey's firing, the events were compared with those of the Saturday Night Massacre during Richard Nixon's administration, and there was debate over whether Trump had provoked a constitutional crisis, as he had dismissed the man leading an investigation into Trump's associates. After Trump dismissed FBI Director James Comey in May 2017, a former FBI director, Robert Mueller, was appointed as special counsel to take over a prior FBI investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 elections and related matters, including coordination or links between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Because of the Russian interference and subsequent investigation, many members of Trump's administration had come under special scrutiny regarding past ties to Russia or actions during the campaign. Several of Trump's top advisors, including Paul Manafort and Michael T. Flynn, who had official positions before Trump replaced them, have strong ties to Russia. Several others had meetings with Russians during the campaign, which they did not initially disclose. Trump himself hosted the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow, in partnership with Russian-Azerbaijani billionaire Aras Agalarov. On many occasions since 1987, Trump and his children and other associates have traveled to Moscow to explore potential business opportunities, such as a failed attempt to build a Trump Tower Moscow. Between 1996 and 2008, Trump's company submitted at least 8 trademark applications for potential real estate development deals in Russia. However, as of 2017, he has no known investments or businesses in Russia. Trump said in 2017, "I can tell you, speaking for myself, I own nothing in Russia. I have no loans in Russia. I don't have any deals in Russia." In 2008, his son, Donald Trump Jr., said, "Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. And we see a lot of money pouring in from Russia." In May 2017, Donald Trump discussed highly classified intelligence in an Oval Office meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, providing details that could expose the source of the information and the manner in which it was collected. The intelligence was about an ISIS plot. A Middle Eastern ally provided the intelligence which had the highest level of classification and was not intended to be shared widely. The New York Times reported that Mr. Trump's disclosure does not appear to have been illegal. The president has the power to declassify almost anything, but sharing the information without the express permission of the ally who provided it was a major breach of espionage etiquette and could jeopardize a crucial intelligence sharing relationship. The White House, through National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, issued a limited denial, saying the story, as reported, was not correct, and stated that no intelligence sources or methods were discussed. McMaster did not deny that information had been disclosed. The following day, Trump stated on Twitter that Russia is an important ally against terrorism, and that he had an absolute right to share classified information with Russia. In February 2018, when Special Counsel Mueller indicted more than a dozen Russians and 3 entities for interference in the 2016 election, Trump's response, predictably, was to assert that the indictment was proof his campaign did not collude with the Russians. The New York Times noted Trump voiced no concern that a foreign power had been trying for nearly 4 years to upend American democracy, much less resolved to stop it from continuing to do so this year. A day after the indictment, Trump used the FBI's alleged failure to stop the Stoneman Douglas High School shooter to call for the end to investigations of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. In July 2018, the Special Counsel's office indicted 12 Russian intelligence operatives and accused them of conspiring to interfere in the 2016 US elections by hacking servers and emails of the Democratic Party and the Hillary Clinton campaign. The indictments were made before Trump's meeting with Putin in Helsinki, in which Trump supported Putin's denial that Russia was involved and criticized American law enforcement and intelligence community. Subsequently, Trump partially walked back some of his comments. A few days later, it was reported that Trump had actually been briefed on the veracity and extent of Russian cyber attacks 2 weeks before his inauguration, back in December 2016, including the fact that these were ordered by Putin himself. The evidence presented to him at the time included text and email conversations between Russian military officers, as well as information from a source close to Putin. According to the report, at the time, in the classified meeting, Trump sounded grudgingly convinced. The Washington Post reported on January 12, 2019, that Trump had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep details of his private conversations with Russian President Putin secret, including in one case by retaining his interpreter's notes and instructing the linguist not to share the contents of the discussions with anyone in the administration. As a result, there were no detailed records, even in classified files, of Trump's conversations with Putin on 5 occasions. According to the Financial Times, there were no American aides present when Trump met privately with Putin at the 2018 G20 Buenos Aires summit in November 2018. On March 22, 2019, Special Counsel Robert Mueller submitted the final report to Attorney General William Barr. On March 24, 2019, Attorney General Barr sent Congress a 4-page letter describing what he said were the special counsel's principal conclusions in the Mueller report. Barr added that since the special counsel did not draw a conclusion on obstruction, this leaves it to the Attorney General to determine whether the conduct described in the report constitutes a crime. Barr continued, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. On April 18, 2019, a 2-volume redacted version of the special counsel's report, entitled Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 Presidential Election, was released to Congress and to the public. About 1/8 of the lines in the public version were redacted. Volume 1 of the report discusses about Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, concluding that interference occurred in sweeping and systematic fashion and violated U.S. criminal law. The report detailed activities by the Internet Research Agency, a Kremlin-linked Russian troll farm, to create a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, and to provoke and amplify political and social discord in the United States. The report also described how the Russian intelligence service, the GRU, performed computer hacking and strategic releasing of damaging material from the Clinton campaign and Democratic Party organizations. To establish whether a crime was committed by members of the Trump campaign with regard to Russian interference, investigators used the legal standard for criminal conspiracy rather than the popular concept of collusion, because a crime of collusion is not found in criminal law or the United States Code. According to the report, the investigation identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign, and found that Russia perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency, and the 2016 Trump presidential campaign expected it would benefit electorally from Russian hacking efforts. Ultimately, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. However, investigators had an incomplete picture of what had really occurred during the 2016 campaign due to some associates of Trump campaign providing either false, incomplete, or declined testimony, exercising the Fifth Amendment, as well as having deleted, unsaved, or encrypted communications. As such, the Mueller report cannot rule out the possibility that information then unavailable to investigators would have presented different findings. Volume 2 of the report covered obstruction of justice. The report described 10 episodes where Trump may have obstructed justice as president, plus one instance before he was elected. The report said that in addition to Trump's public attacks on the investigation and its subjects, Trump also privately tried to control the investigation in multiple ways, but mostly failed to influence it because his subordinates or associates refused to carry out his instructions. For that reason, no charges against the Trump's aides and associates were recommended beyond those already filed. The special counsel could not charge, since the special counsel's office had decided not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment on whether to initiate or decline a prosecution. They did not draw ultimate conclusions about the president's conduct. The report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, but specifically did not exonerate Trump on obstruction of justice, because investigators were not confident that Trump was innocent after examining his intent and actions. The report concluded that Congress has authority to prohibit a president's corrupt use of his authority in order to protect the integrity of the administration of justice, and that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. On May 1, 2019, following publication of the special counsel's report, Barr testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, during which Barr said he didn't exonerate Trump on obstruction as that was not the role of the Justice Department. He declined to testify before the House Judiciary Committee the following day because he objected to the committee's plan to use staff lawyers during questioning. Barr also repeatedly failed to give the unredacted special counsel's report to the Judiciary Committee by its deadline of May 6, 2019. On May 8, 2019, the committee voted to hold Barr in contempt of Congress, which refers the matter to entire House for resolution. Meanwhile, during this same time period, Trump asserted executive privilege via the Department of Justice in an effort to prevent the redacted portions of the special counsel's report and the underlying evidence from being disclosed. Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler stated that the U.S. is in a constitutional crisis because the president is disobeying the law, is refusing all information to Congress. Speaker Nancy Pelosi agreed with Nadler's characterization and told fellow Democrats Trump was self-impeaching by stonewalling Congress, with some Democrats and analysts noting that refusing to comply with subpoenas was the third article of impeachment for Richard Nixon. Following release of the Mueller report, Trump and his allies turned their attention towards investigating the investigators. On May 23, 2019, Trump ordered the intelligence community to cooperate with Barr's investigation of the origins of the investigation, granting Barr full authority to declassify any intelligence information related to the matter. Some analysts expressed concerns that the order could create a conflict between the Justice Department and the intelligence community over closely guarded intelligence sources and methods, as well as open the possibility Barr could cherry-pick intelligence for public release to help Trump. Upon announcing the formal closure of the investigation and his resignation from the Justice Department on May 29th, Mueller stated, "If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime." During his testimony to Congress on July 24, 2019, Mueller answered Republican Representative Ken Buck that a president could be charged with obstruction of justice or other crimes after the president left office. Beyond the Russia investigation, Trump has repeatedly made many false or misleading statements during his campaign and presidency. The statements have been documented by fact-checkers, with political scientists and historians widely describing the phenomenon as unprecedented in modern American politics. Trump's approval rating has been stable, hovering at high 30 to mid-40% through his presidency. Trump's America First foreign policy has featured more unilateral American actions, disregarding the advice and support of many traditional allies while drawing the United States closer to others like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Trump's administration agreed to sell $110 billion of arms to Saudi Arabia, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, withdrew the United States from the Iran deal, and issued a controversial executive order denying entry into the US to citizens from several Muslim-majority countries. The Trump administration unilaterally decided to hold talks with North Korea and imposed tariffs on Chinese imports after pressuring China to change long-standing trade practices. Trump's demand for federal funding of a US-Mexico border wall resulted in the 2018 to 2019 government shutdown, the longest in American history, and followed with Trump's declaration of a national emergency regarding the US southern border. He ended the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as DACA program. The Trump administration enforced a zero-tolerance policy of detaining families entering the US at the US-Mexico border and controversially separating parents from their children, resulting in national and international outcry. Being unsatisfied that he lost the popular vote, Trump made false claims that massive amounts of voter fraud, up to 5 million illegal votes in Clinton's favor, occurred during the election, and he called for a major investigation after taking office. Numerous studies have found no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Prior to the election, Trump named Chris Christie as the leader of his transition team. After the election, Vice President-elect Mike Pence replaced Christie as chairman of the transition team, while Christie became a vice chairman alongside Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, retired Army Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, former presidential candidate Ben Carson, and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Since their initial placement, several members of Trump's team have been replaced and re-replaced. The Trump administration has been characterized by record turnover, particularly among White House staff. By the end of his first year in office, 34% of Trump's original staff had resigned, been fired, or been reassigned. As of early March 2018, 43% of senior White House positions had turned over. On September 5, 2018, the New York Times published an article entitled, "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration," written by an anonymous senior official in the Trump administration. The author asserted that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. Trump reportedly eschews reading detailed briefing documents, including the president's daily brief, in favor of receiving oral briefings. Intelligence briefers reportedly repeat the president's name and title in order to keep his attention. He is also known to acquire information by watching up to 8 hours of television every day, most notably Fox News programs such as Fox and Friends and Hannity, whose broadcast talking points Trump sometimes repeats in public statements, particularly in early morning tweets. Trump reportedly expresses anger if intelligence analyses contradict his beliefs or public statements, with 2 briefers stating they have been instructed by superiors to not provide Trump with information that contradicts his public statements. Trump has reportedly fostered chaos as a management technique, resulting in low morale and policy confusion among his staff, although he has maintained his White House runs like a well-oiled machine. Jeffrey Pfeffer, professor of organizational study at Stanford, noted Trump possesses several management qualities that are prevalent among many leaders, including narcissism and dishonesty, but added, with a modicum of management skill, he could have gotten his wall, and he would probably be on the path to re-election. But he has very few accomplishments to his credit. Trump proved unable to effectively compromise during the 115th United States Congress, which led to significant governmental gridlock and few notable legislative accomplishments, despite Republican control of both houses, the House and the Senate. Presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin found Trump lacks several traits of an effective leader, including humility, acknowledging errors, shouldering blame and learning from mistakes, empathy, resilience, collaboration, connecting with people, and controlling unproductive emotions. The New York Times reported that, before taking office, Mr. Trump told top aides to think of each presidential day as an episode in a television show in which he vanquishes rivals. As president, Trump has made so many false statements in public speeches, remarks, and in tweets that media commentators and fact-checkers have described the rate of his falsehoods as unprecedented for an American president or even unprecedented in politics. This trait of his was similarly observed when he was a presidential candidate. His falsehoods have become a distinctive part of his political identity, and they have also described as part of a gaslighting tactic. His White House has dismissed the idea of objective truth, and his campaign and presidency have been described as being post-truth and hyper-Orwellian. Trump's rhetorical signature includes disregarding data from federal institutions which are incompatible to his arguments, quoting hearsay, anecdotal evidence, and questionable claims in partisan media, denying reality, including his own statements, and distracting when falsehoods are exposed. During the first year of Trump's presidency, the Washington Post's fact-checker wrote, "President Trump is the most fact-challenged politician that the fact-checker has ever encountered. The pace and volume of the president's misstatements means that we cannot possibly keep up." By August 2018, the pace of the false statements increased substantially. In June and July alone, 968 new incidences had been noted, and a total of 4,229 false or misleading statements had by then been recorded in his tenure. Immigration issues led the subject list at that point, with 538 recorded mendacities. Trump's presidency started out with a series of falsehoods initiated by Trump himself. The day after his inauguration, he falsely accused the media of lying about the size of the inauguration crowd. Then he proceeded to exaggerate the size, and Sean Spicer backed up his claims. When Spicer was accused of intentionally misstating the figures, Kellyanne Conway, in an interview with NBC's Chuck Todd, defended Spicer by stating that he merely presented alternative facts. Other notable claims by Trump which fact-checkers rated false include the claim that his electoral college victory was a landslide and that Hillary Clinton received 3 to 5 million illegal votes. In the 7 weeks leading up to the midterm elections, it had risen to an average of 30 per day from 4.9 during his first 100 days in office. The Washington Post found that Trump averaged 15 false statements per day during 2018. As of May 2019, Trump had made more than 10,000 false or misleading claims. Trump continued the use of Twitter from the presidential campaign. Trump has continued to personally tweet from @RealDonaldTrump, his personal account, while his staff tweet on his behalf using the official @POTUS account. His use of Twitter has been unconventional for a president, initiating controversy and becoming news in their own right, with some scholars referring to it as the first true Twitter presidency. The Trump administration has described Trump's tweets as official statements by the President of the United States. A federal judge ruled in May 2018 that Trump's blocking of other Twitter users due to opposing political views violated the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, and he must unblock them. However, according to a plaintiff, Trump has yet to comply with the unblocking order. The administration has appealed the court's ruling. His tweets have been reported as ill-considered, impulsive, vengeful, and bullying, often being made late at night or in the early hours of the morning. His tweets about a Muslim ban were successfully turned against his administration to hold 2 versions of travel restrictions from some Muslim-majority countries. He has used Twitter to threaten and intimidate his political opponents and potential political allies needed to pass bills. Many tweets appear to be based on stories Trump has seen in the media, including far-right news websites such as Breitbart and television shows such as Fox and Friends. Trump has used Twitter to attack federal judges who have ruled against him in court cases and to criticize officials within his own administration, including then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and at various times Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Tillerson was eventually fired via a tweet by Trump. Trump has also tweeted that his Justice Department is part of the American deep state, that there was tremendous leaking, lying, and corruption at the highest levels of the FBI, Justice, and State departments, and that the special counsel investigation is a witch hunt. In August 2018, Trump used Twitter to write that Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop the special counsel investigation immediately. He also referred to it as rigged and its investigators as biased. During his tenure as president, Trump has repeatedly characterized illegal immigrants as criminals, although multiple studies have found they have lower crime and incarceration rates than native-born Americans. Prior to taking office, Trump promised to deport the 11 million illegal immigrants living in the United States and to build a wall along the Mexico-United States border. Upon taking office, Trump directed the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, to begin work on a wall. An internal DHS report estimated Trump's wall would cost $21.6 billion and take 3.5 years to build, far higher than the Trump 2016 campaign's estimate of $12 billion and the $15 billion estimate from Republican congressional leaders. The transcript of a January 2017 phone call between Trump and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto was leaked. In the phone call, Trump conceded that he would fund the border wall, not by charging Mexico as he promised during the campaign, and implored the Mexican president to stop saying publicly the Mexican government would not pay for the border wall. In January 2018, the administration proposed spending $18 billion over the next 10 years on the wall, more than half of the $33 billion spending blueprint for border security. Trump's plan would reduce funding for border surveillance, radar technology, patrol boats, and customs agents. Experts and officials say these are more effective at curbing illegal immigration and preventing terrorism and smuggling than a border wall. The administration embraced the 2017 RAISE Act, which sought to reduce legal immigration levels to the US by 50% by halving the number of green cards issued, capping refugee admissions at 50,000 a year and ending the visa diversity lottery. The administration terminated a program that granted temporary legal residence to unaccompanied Central American minors. 2,714 individuals would need to renew their legal resident status through other more difficult immigrant channels. The administration revoked the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS for short, granted to 60,000 Haitians following the 2010 Haiti earthquake, and 200,000 Salvadorans following a series of devastating earthquakes in 2001. The Salvadorans are parents to an estimated 190,000 US-born children. A federal judge blocked the administration's attempt to deport the TPS recipients, citing what the judge said was Trump's racial animus against non-white, non-European immigrants. An analysis released by Trump's Department of Health and Human Services in September 2017 was found to have removed earlier findings that refugees entering America had a $63 billion net positive effect on tax revenues between 2005 and 2014, with the final report counting only the costs refugees incur. In July 2018, Jeff Sessions rescinded a DOJ guidance on refugees and asylum seekers' right to work, thus prohibiting them from working in the United States. In January 2018, Trump was widely criticized after referring to Haiti, El Salvador, and African nations in general as shithole countries at a bipartisan meeting on immigration. Multiple international leaders condemned his remarks as racist. By February 2018, arrests of undocumented immigrants by ICE increased by 40% during Trump's tenure. Arrests of non-criminal undocumented immigrants were twice as high as during Obama's final year in office. Arrests of undocumented immigrants with criminal convictions increased only slightly. In March 2018, the Commerce Department announced it would add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. Experts noted that the inclusion of such a question would likely result in severe undercounting of the population and faulty data, as undocumented immigrants would be less likely to respond to the census. Blue states, especially California, are therefore likely to get less congressional apportionment and fund apportionment than they would otherwise get, because they have larger undocumented populations. In response, Xavier Becerra, California's Attorney General, announced his intention to sue the administration over the decision. Similar suits were filed in New York, Washington, D.C., and several cities. The American Civil Liberties Union, also known as the ACLU, and immigrants' rights organizations sued in June 2018. Federal District Court Judge Jesse Furman blocked the administration plan on January 15, 2019. Documents released in May 2019 showed Thomas B. Hofeller, an architect of Republican gerrymandering, had found adding the census question would help to gerrymander maps that would be advantageous to Republicans and non-Hispanic whites. Hofeller later wrote the DOJ letter which justified the policy by claiming it was needed to enforce the 1965 Voting Rights Act. In July 2018, experts noted that due to the administration's strict border security policy, there was an increase in criminality and lawlessness along the US-Mexico border. There was a strengthening of ties between human smugglers, organized crime, and corrupt local law enforcement, and organized crime groups were preying on asylum seekers who were prevented by US authorities from filing for asylum. During the 2018 midterm election campaign, Trump sent nearly 5,600 troops to the US-Mexico border for the stated purpose of protecting the United States against a caravan of Central American migrants. The Pentagon had previously concluded the caravan posed no threat to the US. The border deployment was estimated to cost as much as $220 million by the end of the year. With daily warnings from Trump about the dangers of the caravan during the midterms, the frequency and intensity of the caravan rhetoric nearly stopped after Election Day. In May 2018, the administration announced it would separate children from parents caught unlawfully crossing the southern border into the United States. Parents were routinely charged with a misdemeanor and jailed. Their children were placed in separate detention centers, with no established procedure to track them or reunite them with their parents after they had served time for their offense, generally only a few hours or days. Later that month, Trump falsely accused Democrats of creating that policy, despite it originating from his own administration, and urged Congress to get together and pass an immigration bill. Members of Congress from both parties condemned the practice and pointed out that the White House could end the separation on its own. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said, "President Trump could stop this policy with a phone call." The Washington Post quoted a White House official as saying Trump's decision to separate migrant families was to gain political leverage to force Democrats and moderate Republicans to accept hardline immigration legislation. 6 weeks into the implementation of the zero-tolerance policy, at least 2,300 migrant children had been separated from their families. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Physicians, and the American Psychiatric Association condemned the policy, with the American Academy of Pediatrics saying the policy was causing irreparable harm to the children. The policy was extremely unpopular, more so than any major piece of legislation in recent memory. Images of children held in cage-like detention centers, interviews of sobbing mothers who had no idea where their children were and had not heard from them for weeks and months, and an audio of sobbing children resulted in an outrage, calling the practice inhumane, cruel, and evil. On June 30th, a national protest drew hundreds of thousands of protesters from all 50 states to demonstrate in more than 600 towns and cities. All 4 living former First Ladies of the United States, Rosalind Carter, Hillary Clinton, Laura Bush, and Michelle Obama, condemned the policy of separating children from their parents. Amidst the growing outrage, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen falsely claimed on June 17th, "We do not have a policy of separating families at the border, period." On June 20th, 2018, amid worldwide outrage and enormous political pressure to roll back his policy, Trump signed an executive order to end family separations at the US border, unilaterally reversing his policy. He had earlier said, "You can't do it through an executive order." As a result of a class action lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union on June 26th, U.S. District Judge Dana Sabraw issued a nationwide preliminary injunction against the family separation policy and required the government to reunite separated families within 30 days. On June 26th, the administration said 1,442 children had been reunited with their parents, while 711 remain in government shelters because their cases are still under review, their parents have criminal records, or they are no longer in the U.S. Administration officials state that 431 parents of those children have already been deported without their children. Officials said they will work with the court to return the remaining children, including the children whose parents have been deported. In January 2017, Trump signed an executive order which indefinitely suspended admission of asylum seekers fleeing the Syrian civil war, suspended admission of all other refugees for 120 days, and denied entry to citizens of Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen for 90 days. The order also established a religious test for refugees from Muslim nations by giving priority to refugees of other religions over Muslim refugees. Later, the administration seemed to reverse a portion of part of the order, effectively exempting visitors with a green card. After the order was challenged in the federal courts, several federal judges issued rulings enjoining the government from enforcing the order. Trump fired Acting Attorney General Sally Yates after she stated she would not defend the order in court. Yates was replaced by Dana Boente, who stated the DOJ would defend the order. A new executive order was signed in March which limited travel to the US from 6 different countries for 90 days, and by all refugees who did not possess either a visa or valid travel documents for 120 days. The new executive order revoked and replaced the executive order issued in January. In June, the Supreme Court partially stayed certain injunctions that were put on the order by 2 federal appeals courts earlier, allowing the executive order to mostly go into effect. In October, the court dismissed the case, saying the orders had been replaced by a new proclamation, so challenges to the previous executive orders are moot. In September, Trump signed a proclamation placing limits on the 6 countries in the second executive order and added Chad, North Korea, and Venezuela. In October 2017, Judge Derek Watson of the U.S. District Court for the District of Hawaii issued another temporary restraining order. In December 2017, the Supreme Court allowed the September 2017 travel restrictions to go into effect, while legal challenges in Hawaii and Maryland are heard. The decision effectively barred most citizens of Iran, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Chad, and North Korea from entry into the United States, along with some government officials from Venezuela and their families. At the time of the 2016 election, polls by Gallup found Trump had a favorable rating around 35% and an unfavorable rating around 60%, while Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton held a favorable rating of 40% and an unfavorable rating of 57%. 2016 was the first election cycle in modern presidential polling in which both major party candidates were viewed so unfavorably. By January 20, 2017, Inauguration Day, Trump's approval rating average was 42%, the lowest rating average for an incoming president in the history of modern polling. Trump's approval rating during this first term had been incredibly stable and also historically low, with a band from about 36% to 44%. Among President Trump's major accomplishments is the booming industry in books about him, his administration, the state of democracy in America, the rise of autocracy in America and abroad, the reasons for his rise, the basis of his support, the state of the Republican Party, the state of his mental health or lack thereof, the chaos in his White House, and so on. Not all are strictly about Trump. The fact is, the conditions and dynamics that brought us Trump long preceded him, and the changes in the fabric of our republic are paralleled by changes in other long-standing democracies around the globe. A 2018 poll administered by the APSA, American Political Science Association, among political scientists specializing in the American presidency, ranked Donald Trump in last place. Republican survey respondents rated him 40th out of 44th. Independents and other respondents rated him 43rd out of 44th, while Democratic historians rated him 44th out of 44. Siena College Research Institute's 6th presidential expert poll, released in February 2019, placed Donald Trump 42nd out of 44, ahead of Andrew Johnson and James Buchanan. Since being elected as President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump has taken the world on a roller coaster ride that will be etched into the history books now and forever. As we approach his possible second term as the most powerful man in the world, all we can do is expect the unexpected. Historically speaking, that has now become the new normal.
Starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment, it belongs to you.